Throughout the ages, people have always wondered, how did the world begin? And where did all this come from in the first place? These very same questions were pondered by the rishis, the sages of ancient India, who explored the far reaches of the cosmos, not with telescopes, but with their minds. Not until the 20th century did astronomers discover that our universe has a beginning. Earlier, scientists thought that the universe is eternal, beginningless, endless, and unchanging. This obsolete theory said the universe is static. But when astronomers finally learned how to measure the distance and speed of far-off galaxies, they were surprised to discover that the universe is not static. It's expanding, constantly expanding. They measured its rate of expansion and were able to calculate that the universe began about 14 billion years ago, starting with a cosmic explosion that we now call the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, all the matter and energy of the universe was confined to an infinitely small point of infinite density, a point that scientists call a singularity. Now, let's shift our perspective and consider the world view of the ancient rishis. Their spiritual wisdom is found in the Upanishads, which are Sanskrit scriptures on which the non-dual teachings of Advaita Vedanta are based. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we find the teachings of Uddalaka, a great rishi who already understood that the universe has a beginning. He thought that the universe goes through cycles of creation and dissolution, cycles in which the universe alternates between states of being manifest and unmanifest. According to the rishis, the universe is unmanifest at the beginning of each cycle. At that point, it exists in a latent or embryonic state, like a tree that lies dormant inside a seed that's ready to sprout. Later, the unmanifest universe becomes fully manifest, like a tall tree growing from a tiny seed. These two states, manifest and unmanifest, form a kalpa, or eon, a full cycle that's said to last about 4 billion years. This ancient worldview of a cyclic universe can clearly address a crucial question that most scientists admit they can't answer. The question is, if the universe came from a singularity, then where did the singularity come from? Scientists can't answer this question because every branch of science is based on observation. And it's impossible to observe anything that existed before the Big Bang. Yet, some scientists believe that the universe might indeed be cyclic, even though they can't prove it. They think it's possible that a singularity results from the collapse of a prior universe. If that's so, then each successive universe emerges from the remnants of the preceding one. just like a tree sprouts from a seed left behind by another tree that died long ago. But then we have to ask, which comes first, the tree or the seed? I'm not sure how botanists explain this, but our topic here is not botany. We're discussing the nature of a cycle, a continually repeating sequence. From a purely logical perspective, a cycle has no beginning or end. Think about a circle, for example. A circle is a continuous, unbroken loop. It doesn't have a beginning or end. This example describes how the universe can continuously repeat a cycle in which it alternately becomes manifest and unmanifest. This cycle keeps going, one kalpa after another, without beginning or end. In mathematics, this kind of repeating sequence is called infinite. So, an infinite number of prior universes have come and gone before our present universe. That means there was no first cycle, no first manifestation of the universe. Many people find this difficult to comprehend. That's hardly surprising because unless you're a mathematician, the concept of infinity is hard to grasp. The worldview of a cyclic universe can also address several difficult theological questions. Questions like, how did God create the world? And from what did he create it? The act of creation is described differently in the scriptures of each religion. For example, in the Old Testament of the Bible, God is said to create the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then he rested on the 7th day. In the Yajurveda, the universe is said to arise from a sacred fire ritual, into which the cosmic being, Purusha, is sacrificed by the gods in heaven. The Bhagavata Purana tells a very different story. As Lord Vishnu lies at the bottom of the ocean, a lotus bud emerges from his navel and blooms. On the petals of that lotus sits Lord Brahma. When Brahma opens his eyes, the universe becomes manifest. And when he closes his eyes, the universe undergoes dissolution. Of course, all these stories are highly symbolic. You need not accept them as true accounts of historical events. Yet, each of the stories begs the very same question. If the God of Abraham, or Lord Brahma, or any other god created the world, then from what material or substance was the world created? Many scriptures say that before the act of creation, God alone existed, nothing else. According to logic, something cannot come from nothing. That's why most philosophers reject the Christian doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, creation from nothing. This logical problem doesn't arise in a cyclic universe because each cycle is the result of the preceding cycle. So something comes from something. But if the universe has always been alternating between states of manifestation and dissolution in cycle after cycle, then what is God's role in creating the universe? According to Advaita Vedanta, God, or Ishvara, is an all-powerful, intelligent being who causes the unmanifest universe to become manifest in cycle after cycle. It is Ishvara who keeps the wheel of time spinning. Now, even if you accept the concept of a cyclic universe, several other difficult questions still remain. Questions like, why does the universe exist at all? And if the universe is cyclic, then where did the cycle itself come from? Many scientists and philosophers believe that the universe, or the singularity from which it emerged, is self-existent. That means it always existed and nothing was ever created. If nothing was ever created, then there's no role for a creator, an all-powerful intelligent being. This line of reasoning is the basis for the philosophy of materialism. If the universe is self-existent and no higher power or higher reality exists, then the material universe itself becomes the highest reality, and the laws of nature become the highest power. Materialists believe that only matter and energy exist, nothing else. This view is embraced by every branch of science, but it's strongly rejected by most religious and spiritual traditions of the world, including Advaita Vedanta. Yet, even though science is based on materialism, many scientists themselves are not materialists. They include followers of many different religious and spiritual traditions. According to the ancient rishis, the universe is not self-existent, nor is it the highest reality. Instead, the rishis said that the universe has an underlying substratum, a fundamental reality that endows everything with existence. They called that underlying reality Brahman, and they described it as Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Satyam means pure existence, existence itself, the fabric of reality out of which the universe is woven. Brahman is sometimes compared to a canvas on which a beautiful scene has been painted. Just as a fabric canvas gives existence to an imaginary world painted on it, in a similar way, Brahman gives existence to the world in which we live. Jnanam means pure intelligence, awareness, consciousness. Brahman is not some kind of inert substance or material out of which everything is made. Brahman is the source of the intelligent order that governs the universe. Brahman is the basis for the unchanging laws of nature, laws that keep planets in their orbits, laws that make our hearts pump. Brahman is the foundation for every kind of intelligence and sentience in the world. And finally, Anantam means limitless, infinite, supreme. So, Brahman can be said to be the limitless conscious substratum of existence. The rishi Uddalaka taught all this to his son, Shvetaketu. In the Chandogya Upanishad, he said, Sareva Saumya idam agra asit, ekameva advitiyam. Saumya, my dear son, agre, at first, idam asit, all this, everything in the world, was sat eva, pure existence, Brahman. That Brahman is ekam eva, one alone, and advitiyam, which means one without a second, that is, non-dual. This expression also suggests that Brahman has no parts or divisions. Brahman is undifferentiated and unchanging. So, Brahman is the one self-existent reality that gives existence to everything else. But here we have a problem. How can a non-dual substratum give rise to a world of duality? Or in other words, how can an infinite series of universes arise from a partless, undifferentiated, unchanging source? As we are about to see, these important questions can't be answered in a conventional way, because they happen to lie outside the scope of logic and reason. Let me explain. To ask how the universe comes from Brahman is to inquire into the cause-effect relationship between non-dual Brahman and the cyclic universe. Non-dual Brahman is the cause, and the cyclic universe is the effect. But the problem is, cause-effect relationships are actually part of the universe. Causality itself exists only when the universe exists. So, from the standpoint of Brahman, a standpoint that logically precedes the universe, there's no such thing as causality. For non-dual Brahman, there can be no cause-effect relationships. For this reason, to ask how Brahman causes the world to exist is not a logically valid question. Science faces the very same stumbling block in its Big Bang theory. Time exists only after the Big Bang, so you can't logically ask when the singularity exploded. Space exists only after the Big Bang, so you can't ask where the singularity was before the Big Bang. And causality exists only after the Big Bang, so you can't ask what caused the singularity to explode. Advaita Vedanta addresses these logical problems through its doctrine of Maya. Maya, in this context, means a creative power or capacity that enables non-dual Brahman to give existence to a world of duality. The word Maya also suggests a power that's mysterious or unfathomable. According to an old Sanskrit dictum, Maya is defined as that which makes the impossible possible. Maya is a solution to an unsolvable problem. Exactly how Maya does that can't be discussed here, but you can find it explained in some of my other videos. I'll leave links in the description below. Now, let's discuss how the universe developed or evolved into its current form. First, we'll consider the perspective of science and its Big Bang theory. And then we'll consider Vedanta's view of a cyclic universe. Whatever happened in the first few moments after the Big Bang is largely unknown, and it's subject to lots of scientific speculation. According to most current theories, the Big Bang produced an inconceivably intense burst of energy. That energy expanded outwards with incredible speed, and then it gradually began to cool down. As it cooled, it produced subatomic particles, strange, highly energetic particles like quarks and gluons. After 500,000 years, those particles began to combine to form the very first atoms, mostly atoms of hydrogen gas. About 100 million years later, giant clouds of hydrogen gas began to contract due to the force of gravity. As the clouds contracted, the hydrogen gas grew increasingly hot and dense until the atoms were squeezed together so forcefully that they began to fuse with each other. Such nuclear fusion reactions gives birth to stars like our sun and enables them to burn brightly for billions of years. As stars grow old, they produce other atoms deep inside their superheated cores, heavier atoms like oxygen, carbon, and iron. And then, when stars explode at the end of their lifetimes, all the heavy atoms they produced are violently scattered into the emptiness of space. From those very atoms, all the planets, moons, asteroids, and other celestial objects were formed. And we know for sure that at least one of those planets provided a suitable environment for the evolution of plants, animals, and human beings. The famous scientist Carl Sagan once said, "The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, and the carbon in our apple pies were all made in the interiors of collapsing stars." So we are all made of stardust. We know all this today as a result of decades of meticulous scientific research. But long ago, the sages of ancient India had no access to the sophisticated instruments and powerful mathematical tools used by scientists today. Then, how were those rishis able to explore the universe? And how did they come to know that the universe had a beginning? Well, the rishis are known as Krantadarshis, those who can see beyond, that which is far away. That is, those who can grasp or comprehend what ordinary people cannot. The rishis were endowed with some kind of extraordinary intuitive power, a power that could produce extraordinary insights. Based on those insights, the rishis devised a detailed model to describe the universe in which we live. It's important to understand that such models are devised to explain how things behave, and not what the things actually are. For example, scientists devised a model that shows how beams of light behave either as waves of electromagnetic energy or as particles of light, photons. Their model doesn't say that light actually is a wave or a particle. It only describes how light behaves. The rishis devised a different kind of model, a model based not on scientific measurements and mathematical calculations, but instead a model based on their own extraordinary insights. Instead of describing the world in terms of matter and energy, as science does, the rishis described it in terms of three fundamental qualities or properties of nature. Properties they called sattva, rajas, and tamas. In this context, tamas means the property of being solid or dense and having inertia, similar to the scientific concept of mass. Rajas here means the property of activity or motion, somewhat like the scientific concept of energy. And sattva means the property of balance, harmony, or intelligence, perhaps corresponding to the laws of nature. Of course, we now have to ask, where did those three gunas come from? As we saw before, the universe in which we live is said to have arisen from a prior universe that has undergone dissolution and remains in an unmanifest state. In that unmanifest state, all three gunas are already present, but they're undifferentiated. They're intermixed with each other. The universe becomes manifest when the gunas become individually differentiated into sattva, rajas, and tamas. In this way, the universe goes through cycles of manifestation and dissolution due to the gunas, alternating between states of being differentiated and undifferentiated. Now, suppose you ask, what makes the universe become manifest or undergo dissolution at a particular time? Fortunately, that question is thoroughly explained by the doctrine of karma. That's not part of our topic here, but it's discussed in other videos, linked below. Okay, after the three gunas have become differentiated, they undergo a process of development or evolution. The three gunas first produce 5 subtle elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Subtle here means non-physical or imperceptible. These 5 subtle elements combine to form 5 physical elements. Like in science, quarks and gluons combine to form various kinds of atoms. The 5 physical elements are the basic constituents from which the entire world is made, from distant galaxies to the cells in your body. But is that really all there is? Are you not anything more than the cells in your body? That's what we'll discuss next. Your body is not a machine made of inert parts. It's alive, and it's endowed with powerful faculties like the ability to see, hear, speak, and think. Until the mid-19th century, most scientists believed that matter and energy alone could not be the source of biological life. Organisms capable of movement, digestion, reproduction, and so on. So, in addition to matter and energy, early scientists postulated a third principle, the principle of life. They called it élan vital, or vital energy. This outdated theory is called vitalism. Later scientists refuted this theory by showing that matter and energy alone can indeed produce living organisms, even human beings who can see, hear, and think. So then, how did the ancient rishis understand the origins of biological life? They considered all living organisms, including human beings, to be made of subtle and physical elements, like everything else in the world. They thought that our physical bodies are made of physical elements, whereas our faculties of thinking, seeing, hearing, and so on are made of subtle elements. The rishis divided the faculties into several groups. They identified 5 kinds of prana, or life force, such as breathing, circulation, and digestion. They identified 5 faculties of action, like the ability to walk and talk. They identified 5 sense faculties, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And they identified various mental faculties, like thinking and feeling. All these faculties together are said to comprise the subtle body, the non-physical part of a person that abides in a physical body and endows it with life. This ancient worldview can be nicely understood using a modern metaphor, a metaphor that compares your physical body to components of a computer hardware. A computer's power supply represents your heart. Its CPU and memory chips represent your brain. Its wires represent your nerves, and so on. Of course, without software, computer hardware can't do anything. Software endows that hardware with the ability to execute programs, to store and retrieve data, and to interact with users. In the same way, the subtle body endows a physical body with life, intelligence, and purposeful action. Without software, a computer is just an inert object, and the same is true of a physical body after the subtle body departs at the time of death, according to the doctrine of karma. But there's something missing in this metaphor. A computer with a powerful CPU, lots of memory, and the latest software is completely useless unless it's plugged in. Electricity enables its hardware and software to function. Here, electricity represents consciousness, your awareness. In Advaita Vedanta, consciousness is understood as that which illumines or reveals the activities of your mind, all your thoughts, emotions, memories, and so on. These mental activities are considered to be subtle objects, called vrittis. When vrittis arise in your mind, you experience them. They become known to you. The contents of your mind are known to you simply because you are a conscious, sentient being. According to the rishis, the consciousness that reveals the activities of your mind is Atma, the true self. They discover that Atma is eternal, unborn, limitless, changeless, and utterly untouched by suffering of all kinds. For that reason, Atma is often referred to as the so-called inner divinity. The nature of Atma is elaborately discussed in many other places. So let's return to our discussion about cosmology. The last question we'll consider here is, what is the role of consciousness in science's Big Bang theory and in Vedanta's concept of a cyclic universe? How does consciousness fit in to those very different worldviews? Well, most scientists readily admit that they don't really know yet what consciousness is. That's not surprising because consciousness is not a physical thing they can observe or measure with their sophisticated instruments. That doesn't stop scientists from speculating about the nature of consciousness, but speculative insights and scientific proof are miles apart. According to Advaita Vedanta, consciousness cannot be scientifically studied. Why? Because science is directed outwards, towards objects in the world, whereas Vedanta is directed inwards, towards your own subjective experience. Let me explain. Suppose you eat a juicy apple while a scientist examines your brain and measures the activity of all the neurons that get activated. Those measurements could probably tell you a lot about how a brain works, but they could tell you nothing whatsoever about the taste of an apple. How the apple tastes to you can't be scientifically observed or measured. In this way, the taste of an apple or any other kind of subjective experience lies outside the scope of scientific inquiry. Your experience of the taste of an apple is due to the particular vrittis that arise in your mind when you eat the fruit. Those vrittis are known only to you, not to a scientist who is examining your brain. Now, if consciousness lies outside the scope of scientific inquiry, then how does it fit into the worldview of Advaita Vedanta? Well, as we discussed before, Vedanta says that everything exists because of an underlying substratum, the fabric of reality called Brahman. It is Brahman that gives existence to the three gunas. It is Brahman that gives existence to the subtle and physical elements, and to everything made from those elements, including your own body and mind. According to the ancient rishis, since Brahman gives existence to everything, then it must also give existence to consciousness. The very consciousness that enables you to know what's happening in your mind right now. The consciousness that's your true self, Atma, is not separate or distinct from its underlying reality, Brahman. In fact, Atma and Brahman are not two different realities. They are one and the same. This is actually the highest teaching of Advaita Vedanta. The rishis expressed it in short aphorisms known as Mahavakyas. A particularly well-known Mahavakya is Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. This aphorism reveals the truth that Tvam, your essential nature as pure consciousness, is identical to Brahman, indicated by the pronoun tat, or that. Another Mahavakya declares Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnanam, consciousness itself, is Brahman, the substratum of all that exists. To understand these Mahavakyas conceptually or theoretically is almost useless. It only adds to the staggering amount of information already crammed into your head. On the other hand, your non-conceptual, immediate, personal realization of what these Mahavakyas are meant to convey can bring about a complete transformation of your worldview. When you personally discover what the rishis discovered, all suffering comes to an end, resulting in perfect peace and contentment. This is moksha, liberation, or enlightenment.